In this video, I'm going to go over some of the regions, forms, and anatomy of the head and neck. So I've done a little bit of pre-drawing here just to kind of expedite things today. And so first, I just want to talk about the two regions of the head. So basically, this is a side view here, and what we have is we're going to refer to as the cranium, which basically includes the brain case and the more kind of spherical portion of the head here. And then we have the facial region, which essentially, if we, hit somewhere by the cheekbone and up kind of this kind of temporal angle here, it pretty well kind of hangs off of the cranium. And one thing I'm going to point out, this is a top view here of the skull. And in reality here, basically what's happening is, at the back of the cranium, it's a little bit wider. So we're going to kind of taper towards the front. And when we think about basically adding geometric forms, giving this sort of like orientation shorthand to the skull, basically what we're doing here is throwing a rectangle around here from the back up the side to the front. And you'll see that in my pre-drawing here. But one thing to note here is that you will need to shave a bit off, here and here. And as with a lot of our kind of geometrically constructed anatomy, there are, this is essentially an approximation to find that kind of specific trajectory for our, regions of the body. And so I'm going to start off with our skull here. So one of the main kind of proportional relationships in the head is basically, and I kind of pre-measured this, but basically our eyes are going to be in the middle. Double measure that. All right. So here is that kind of rectangle I was talking about. Here is the cranium, and then the facial region kind of hanging off there. I'm just going to bisect this front plane and drop a midline in so we can get going. So basically you'll have, there are kind of, bones that make up the cranium, but I'm just going to refer to those as regions. So we have the frontal bone here, which is going to make up that front. So we'll have the brow ridge here. And the frontal bone kind of sits somewhere like this. And then we have the temporal bone here, which if we're talking about, kind of flattening out the side, that's where that's going to be. That's going to be kind of our removed section a little bit, and then through the frontal bone as well, as you can see with that spacing. And so really, one generalization I kind of learned here in school, was basically we could take, cranium and facial region and almost, have like a kind of egg tipped down this way. But, using spheres, using eggs, we really want to have more kind of geometry on here. so we can get some of that orientation. Anyways, I'm going to move on with the skull here. So we have the orbital bones here, which basically, those will look like, they're pretty rectangular with kind of rounded edges, and those will kind of vary in shape. That might be a little like tall or something. And so we also get this sort of angle here, and then below that we have the cheekbone here, this sort of angle coming off, and that cheekbone kind of reaches back here, back to the back. Here, I'll bring this up later when we're over here, but this is the mastoid process. I don't know if we'd actually see that from that angle because we have the TMJ joint here, and then the angle of the mandible here. And so you'll notice I've kind of stayed away from this area. Basically what we have there, I'm going to complete this here. And so essentially we have with what's called the maxilla, which we can kind of, it's basically like I don't know, that could be like what, like a quarter of an egg, something like that, sitting on top of like a half of a hockey puck, maybe. And so what I'm going to do to kind of illustrate that is I'm going to bring my midline down the nose here, and then coming out like something like that. And so we can see that at this edge here. My brow ridge got a little dark. So anyways, those are our kind of main regions, features of the skull. And I'm going to talk a little bit about, how, like the nose kind of works in here with that nasal bone. And then if we kind of skip down to the neck, basically what's happening here is, and this is of course, kind of popping the head off just so we can see those major forms in the neck, because there is, a lot of people, they'll come in with like rib cage here and just say like, oh yeah, there's like a cylinder for the neck, something like that. But there's a few, complex planes there, and so what we have here is basically, in here we have like, spinal column going down, and then, all your kind of vital organ stuff going on. Here we have, larynx, hyoid, and so this kind of sits in here like this. And then we have and I'm going to talk about how that kind of changes in positions. But we have the sternocleidomastoid here, kind of flanks the neck. And that has basically a part that attaches to the sternum, part to the clavicle, and then to the mastoid process, which would be, here if we had our skull on. So this is our sternum portion. Our sternum would be sitting right here, and then this is our kind of clavicle portion, which is a little bit thinner. But you can see this, it is overlapped by the platysma, but you can see this in certain positions. So I'm going to go ahead and fill that in just so we can kind of keep these a little separate. And then along the back here we have the trapezoid. That makes up, a lot of that kind of shoulder here. And then of course, as we talked about in the rib cage, you know, here's sternum, here's clavicle, hits back like this, and then you know we'd have like deltoid, pectoralis in this area. So again, I'll kind of bring that up over here after after we talk about a few of the facial features. So, as I mentioned previously, you know, basically what we'll want to do, and I'm gonna draw kind of an articulated head here, is you know we basically have you know front of the face, jaw, and so I'm really kind of like flattening this out at the beginning, but then we can also kind of treat this with like this major plane break here, right? So if we go back to what we've been talking about, this whole unit, front, side. And so even though, you know, like I said here, even though these are rounded forms, we can really kind of like, you know, we can still, you know, kind of box those out. Here's, you know, top. And so again, you know, halfway we have our eyes. A little bit, how that's going to kind of break down is we'll basically have our brow ridge here. This plane kind of kicks back and then comes forward a little bit. And then our eyeballs kind of sit in here, just to give that some orientation. And then that nasal bone comes off here. And so I'm going to basically pop that in here. So here we have kind of that angle of the forehead. I'm going to come back and then forward. Bring that brow ridge across. And then I'm going to cut that out too. So essentially we have this kind of rectangle here. That we're essentially taking this kind of chunk out of it, and I'm exaggerating here. Yeah, something like that. And I'm also going to bring that zygomatic arch back here, that kind of coming off the cheekbone. And then I'm going to start with a midline here. So that's going to come down the forehead, back a little bit to come down off that brow ridge, and then I'm going to come straight down that nose. And then that's going to cut under, and then maybe we could say like, you know, lip here, chin. And so what I'm doing, I'm cutting that midline down, and then we're going to add some kind of form to that. So I'm going to start this nose as a very kind of pyramidal form. This is more of like a triangular prism, and I'll talk a little bit about the cartilage regions when we get up here. Yeah, something like that. You know, under here we have that maxilla, right? Our egg, you know, quarter egg hockey puck over here. And so I'm gonna wrap some lines around here just to show that, and maybe this, you know, this is our midline, so we have a little bit of chin on either side there. Yeah. So in here, and I'm going to go with the blue a little while longer, we have, as I said here, basically those eyeballs sitting here. And the one kind of important thing to note, you know, even with like exaggerations with like cartooning and stuff, basically like all that eyelid, you know, eyelid and all those kind of forms coming off of it, basically those are all going to still be encompassed by that orbital. So you know, the eyeball is going to sit back in here, and if this is an anatomical left eye, you know, basically I can kind of wrap. Here we have like a long angle here, small angle, long angle, small angle. And everyone's going to be different. You know, we have, you know, wide variety of, you know, size of eyelid, size of eyes. But that, you know, that goes into, you know, likeness. And I'm just kind of talking about regions and forms. And then we have this kind of fold over here. A little bit of like a depression here. But it, you know, depending on, you know, some people can have like, you know, small upper lid, big lower lid, big upper lid, small lower lid, you know, big upper lid, big lower lid, and then, or, you know, small upper lid, small lower lid. And so these, you know, these things change between people. So here, you know, I have like small upper lid, kind of mid-size lower lid. And then I can throw, you know, like iris, pupil here. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to throw that in there, and kind of wrap this around that globe sphere. I mean, you know, something like that. Here, because that's changing in space, that form's going to change a little bit. And lower lid here. And so you can see, even in this kind of invented schematic, you know, I'm not bringing that lid, you know, below there. Here we have what's called, I believe it's called supercilious. So this sort of like that kind of angle in the middle of the eyes, the bridge of the nose, we can call it, and that kind of angles in and then angles back out. That also varies, of course. And so we have nasal bone here, you know, something like that. And this is where we come off the bone, and this will actually turn into cartilage. So we have, you know, like frontal cartilage, this intermediate cartilage, and then the nasal wing here. And again, I'm going to redraw that up there. Down the nose, here's the philtrum in the middle. And if we talk about, you know, if we're kind of wrapping these around, the corner here you have like the nodes at the edges of the mouth. And then we'll kind of wrap this around as well. Lower lid here, again, kind of following that midline, down into the chin. And then one important thing, one thing that's kind of huge in drawing are those overlaps. And so what's going to happen here is basically we have, you know, that angle of the brow, and then that cheek coming out like this, and then that's going to wrap behind the this sort of muzzle type form here. So here, here, and then here, something like that. And I'm going to kind of cut this back a little bit, something like that. Ear's going to hit, you know, I think it's maybe kind of halfway here. Throw this kind of C shape in. Here we have the jaw. And so we'll have this sort of form that kind of comes out of the tear duct and basically, you know, wraps somewhere like there and there. This will, you know, this is kind of like that jowly form. And then cheek, you know, we have a large muscle here as well. And then this is going to be, you know, this area is going to be pretty bony. And then associated with the temporal temporal bone, we have the temporal muscle here, which you'll see that move, you know, when people kind of open and close their mouths. So there's our sort of, you know, half articulated head. And then looking at the kind of sections on the nose, again, here's the nasal bone. And then we'll have the cartilage coming down here. And then that frontal cartilage here. And then the nasal wing coming off here. And that's, you know, your nostrils kind of sit under here. And that, you know, sizes here are going to vary widely. Let's see, I'll just go ahead and jump over here, talk about the mouth a little, because I kind of vaguely, you know, hit that here. And so these are the nodes at the corners of the mouth I was talking about. Also, you know, nodes here at the, what's called at the bottom of the pillars there. And then you have kind of three sections on that top lip. So the sort of like frontal section here, philtrum here, that's that, you know, kind of form there. And then these kind of side forms here on the top lip. And then I usually kind of lump, you know, just say like, okay, you know, like bottom lip here. And then here we have that chin. And then again, one thing I mentioned here was that muzzle kind of hits around like this, and something like that. Sternocleidomastoid. One kind of real interesting thing there, and this is kind of like one of the largest kind of form changes in the necks. But basically here we have what I've drawn is like frontal view of the torso, here and here. And so what's happening, that's totally jammed together. But what I'm basically showing here is that, you know, frontal view here, and then that turn of the head, you know, here. And so what happens there with that sternocleidomastoid, and I'm just gonna kind of highlight it in red. Basically, it's from the front. You know, it kind of has this V shape here, right? And then as, you know, one thing you can kind of use as a marker is that mastoid process that sits behind the ear. Here. And so what's happening as that head turns, basically if you're tracking the mastoid process, those will kind of visually get foreshortened. And so then if I recolor our sternocleidomastoid here and here, you can see how that changes from this to, you know, this. And so that one closest to us is kind of straight up and down. Something like that. And so if we're, you know, if we are, you know, drawing the head from life, you know, basically, you know, what I've done here is again kind of using that box, something like this, this, this. But that's going to change in class a lot. We'll see, we'll basically be looking at the head, from below eye level. Or sorry, we're at eye level. The head is above eye level. So you're not going to see that top, right? So we can kind of angle it up like this. Here it's turning this way. If we're at eye level, you won't see top either. But you won't see under that chin. So again, I'm just gonna kind of run through this process again. And ears, you can really kind of, maybe in class we can talk a little over ears, but basically if you just hit that, one thing that's going to be important here, and I don't usually start with ears, but having that kind of, this angle will vary between people, but having this kind of straight connection between the top of the ear and the lobe, and then that sort of C shape, which again will definitely vary. So midline here, kind of coming down, push of the nose, and I'm so basically what I'm doing here is I'm boxing this out to find that orientation, and then I'm finding that midline to basically solidify that kind of frontal relationship. Something like that. Angle, brow, and then that angle back. Again, that kind of muzzle form here. And really, I'm starting with the eye here, but to find orientation, to find, likeness, to find all that, what's going to be more important than your, pupil, your iris, whatever, is going to be that shape of the orbital. So, I threw the eyeball, I set the eyeball back in there, but one thing to pay attention to is, I set that up by placing that orbital first. So that's going to be kind of your main cue. Once we start strongly lighting the figure, and I say I have light coming from up here, that's going to fall. There's going to be some kind of significant, shadowing in here. One thing you'll see a lot is, in some of these older paintings, sometimes the eyes, like in Caravaggio and stuff, sometimes the eyes will kind of be overshadowed and blacked out in some cases. And so you can see, here, and this again, this is getting into value, but if light's hitting here and we look at that from the side, basically we have, upper lid, eyeball, lower lid, but none of that's, if the light's catching here, that's gonna be in shadow. If I shadow the whole thing, our light's gonna mainly hit up on that brow ridge, maybe on temporal, on the nose. So anyways, always favor the shape of the orbital over the, pupil and iris. Again, coming down the bridge of the nose here, nasal bone, bringing that nose off. Cartilage of the tip of the nose, nasal wing here. You have like this kind of furrow here, all kind of wrapping into that, playing into that muzzle, that overall muzzle form. Coming off the tear duct, we have this kind of form coming down here, a kind of jowly bit. Muzzle here, cheekbone, and then this form kind of wrapping around the other side, here and here. If I wrap like a cross contour line, that might come in like that, like that. Again, the nodes here, and then throwing in kind of that part of the mouth. And then one thing we'll see, in kind of standard lighting situations, is basically we get this sort of like this value patterning happening, which, if we look at this from the side, I'll do this up here. But here's eye, something like that, and then like nose coming off, upper lip, lower lip, chin. Basically again, if we have that light hitting here, basically what we have is, and I'll color these in just to kind of differentiate. We have like a up plane, down plane, up, down, up, down, up, down, and then like down back here. And so how that kind of manifests is, basically if I throw, this in here, pit of the neck, sternocleidomastoid, just getting a little bit of a, if that's quite right. But basically how that manifests is this sort of value pattern, which I've kind of gleaned from Will Weston. We have, light, dark, light, dark, light, dark, light, and then dark, dark. And so again, this is more on kind of like standard, obviously if you had, some kind of like Halloween-y like uplighting here, that's going to reverse the light and dark. But just keep in mind, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, down. So that would be light, dark, light, dark, light, dark, light, dark, dark. And then one last thing, that's important. I kind of drew it here. This is something that I, making, back in the early 2000s with, my really cool like skull high school art. One thing I noticed, and I've kind of haven't been able to unsee it, but basically, I did this drawing of like a kind of half, kind of what we did here, half skull, half articulated head. But basically, one kind of region you can't really overlook is, I said cranium, facial, and then, if we're again throwing that sternocleidomastoid in here, there's this really important kind of section here. It's really easy to just go from like head straight to shoulders, but you do need to you need to put that neck in there. And so there is this sort of underplane here, under the jawline, under the chin, that you really need to pay attention to. And then, you know, here, if we do something like that. So do pay attention to that. I drew mostly kind of from the top today, but you know, if I do a quick little drawing up here, you know, say from the bottom. And when you're drawing from the bottom, a lot of these kind of forms on the head, they're gonna kind of arc out. You know, something like that. So, you know, maybe this person's like looking up or something. You know, here's like underplane of the nose, that orbital from the bottom coming back here to the ear. Here's like jawline up here. Maybe that mouth wrapping around. I don't know if I have enough of the back of the head on. But anyways, what I'm kind of getting to is that this region here. So, you know, the visibility of this will change from, you know, view to view, but this is a form that's there. You know, the kind of like, you know, this kind of significance and, you know, visual weight of it will vary a little bit. You know, some people might, you know, come straight back. You know, some people might have, you know, more of a quote unquote double chin. Oh, that was extra scary. Yeah, this just kind of plays into, you know, our kind of individuality as people and creating a likeness. So yeah, that kind of wraps up our head and neck. If I think of anything else, I'll make a part two. Have an excellent day.